You are listening to the Cattle Call Podcast. This is the place where computer-aided design and drafting meets humor and practicality, with a touch of business acumen thrown in for fun. Jim and Rocco, the owners of Zentech Consultants, the premier U.S. technology consulting firm for architecture, engineering, construction, and manufacturing, discuss the fascinating world of CAD with some humor and some honesty. The Cattle Call Podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Cattle Call Podcast with Jim and Rocco from Zentech Consultants. I am Jim Coppinger, and with me, as always, is my partner in crime, Mr. Rocco Parisi.
Hello.
There you go. Oh, thank you for joining the podcast. I'm glad you decided to show up. Just for that, you know what? You're my partner in crime. I want all the federal law enforcement officials listening to know if there is any crime, it's Rocco's fault. How's that? Now I'm just blaming you because you're not joining in. God, just leave me hanging like that. But that's all right. Luckily, I have someone with us here in the studio today who will actually talk to me, and we're glad to welcome back Kim Fuhrman.
I don't know. After what you said before we started recording.
Oh, no, don't do that, because then it's going to bring up to something that my wife's going to want to know about, and that's just going to lead to misery. Don't throw me under that bus. Kim Fuhrman is back again. Kim is the president of AUGI, that's AUGI, and she is also the world's leading architectural technologist, which I still say is the greatest title on the planet. I love that. I love that title. So
it's very non-committal.
It is, but it works beautifully. It's like, man, I can do anything. I'm an architectural technologist. It's wonderful stuff. So that's great. So Kim, thank you so much for coming back again. I'm glad we didn't scare you off.
Thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure.
It's always fun.
All right. So today we're going to be talking about energy analysis and LEED. That's LEED. LEED using Revit and FormIt with Insight360, which, let's be honest, is a group of words that I barely understand. Luckily, we have Kim here to talk us through it and help simple-minded folks, like me, understand what technology can actually do on the design side when it is properly implemented. All right, so Kim, first, let me ask you about your background here. What type of LEED projects have you done, and how did you get involved in doing LEED work?
Yeah, so the funny thing is, when I first got into LEED, it was kind of I was kind of drug into it, if you will, because I worked for an architectural firm at the time, and this was back in 2010, 2011. And they had a pretty large retail client at that time that started requiring LEED on all of their projects. And so LEED being Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. And there are LEED accredited professionals, of which I became one. And at that time, this firm that I worked for, they did not have a LEED accredited professional on staff. And basically, you got a really thick, about 3-inch thick book. You could take some classes, I guess. They had some in-person classes at that time. But basically, you had to study this book and go and take at least one, if not 2 exams. There's there's a basic LEED Green Associate exam, which is the first exam, and then there are specialty exams. I have the building design and construction accreditation also. So kind of a 2-part process. I took both parts in the same day, which was rather brutal, and I wouldn't recommend that. Thankfully passed both, but I kind of got into the whole environmental design realm out of necessity, and just needing to have someone on staff who was LEED accredited. And so I kind of went into it with blinders on, thinking, okay, this is just sort of green stuff, and we have to be environmentally responsible and so forth.
Yeah, sure. If we make kale shakes and drink those while we're designing, we'll be fine. It's not a problem.
Absolutely.
Right.
Do yoga, you're good.
It's all set.
But it really is so much more than that. And, I'm proud to say that I've worked on quite a few LEED certified buildings, and really some interesting projects. We had the first LEED silver, and there's different, I'll go in a little bit later to the different levels of LEED certification. But we have a LEED Silver animal shelter. It was the first of its kind in Pennsylvania. And, we did all sorts of interesting things with that. We put solar panels on the roof. We used a lot of local materials. And really, waste management was a big thing on that project during construction. I worked on a women's shelter. That project really became near and dear to my heart. Working with the women who have come from really difficult backgrounds, and being able to provide a facility for them that is not only safe. Security was a big deal with this building, but that is also a good building for people to live in, for the short term while they get back on their feet. So things like that. We did a combined fire and emergency services building. And in that, we put in a 10,000 gallon rainwater collection tank. And they use that to wash the fire trucks. So
that makes sense.
A lot of interesting, kind of things that go along with creating a green building, for sure.
That's nice when you can actually get to work on projects like that. They happen few and far between, but it is particularly nice. In my own background, I've done a little bit. We did I did one lead, and I'm not lead certified, but the company I was working for we did one where we were actually using it was a methane recycling plant where basically we were recycling, trash and combustible beddage to generate methane in order to operate the facility itself off of its own natural recycling output, which was kind of cool.
Right.
And I also got to do like a fire academy kind of thing too.
Right.
So they're great when you can do those types of. They make you feel good. They make you feel like you're actually part of the solution rather than just another cog in the machine causing more problems. So,
right.
So I have a question. I mean, my involvement. I take out the recycling at home. Does that count?
Hey, listen,
absolutely.
I have talked to your wife. She says that's not true.
Yes.
Jamie says you never take it out.
I do.
All right. So cool. All right. So Kim, let's start by breaking down today's topic here, right? So it's a mouthful, right? We're dealing with Revit, FormIt, and Insight360. And I know, those are all Autodesk products. So let's find out what they all do, right? And how they all tie together. So let's start with FormIt, right? It's not as well known or as widely used as Revit. So I think it'd be a good idea to get us an intro on how it works, right? So, I mean, I'm assuming, right, that this approach that you're talking about here today begins in FormIt. Can you give us an overview of what does that system do, and how do people begin generating the model data that they're going to need to do an effective energy analysis on a project, right? What are the start points and what are the key components we need to have in place?
Right. So FormIt is a early schematic design program. It's very similar to other, shall we say, sketchy programs.
I see what you did there.
And it works. It works off of mass modeling, and so it's a very kind of a push-pull type of creation when you're working with the building masses. You can bring materials, and you can actually use Revit. Some Revit families actually directly into FormIt and vice versa. So you can take your FormIt model and then you can push it up to Revit and continue the design process from there. But it does, a lot of visualization. It also does some analysis. And, like we're talking about today, it does, some solar analysis. So when we have our building masses, we can see how the sun is going to hit the building. The key thing in either program really is setting the building location. I don't know if you're aware, but when you're in a Revit project, the default location for a Revit project is, I believe, Manchester, New Hampshire, or Boston, Massachusetts, somewhere up there.
I can't imagine why.
Because that's where they created the software, right? So if you're doing an analysis in Yuma, Arizona, you want to make sure that you're changing your project location. And you can actually import, I think it's now using Bing Maps to place the building onto the site. So you could bring in an image of the site itself, and you can orient your building according to that that site image. So, it's a really easy way to, again, visualize how your building is going on the site. And then you can use the analysis tools to see how the sunlight hits the building. And then you can also take that mass and send it to Insight, which we'll talk about Insight, I guess, after we talk about the FormIt or the Revit connection there.
Yep. Okay, and it's funny, actually, we've been doing a lot of these podcasts actually fairly recently on exactly that, right? The integration of the civil side into the BIM technology process. Spatial location orientation, and that really is a big key component. So,
yeah, okay. Absolutely. Yeah.
All right.
I think a lot of people, they go into these modeling programs and they just start creating their building, which is fine until you get to the analysis part, and then you want to make sure that you have things set correctly. As much in alliance with whatever the real world conditions are, so that you get pretty accurate results.
Yeah. Yep, it's a very important aspect. Cool. So, all right. So then, let's talk about the Revit piece of the puzzle. Then, Revit is the powerhouse 3D BIM modeling software out there on the market. They hold a massive. Yeah, so they say. They hold a massive amount of the marketplace, right? So we can reasonably assume that most of the listeners here are familiar with it at some level. Most folks in the CAD world, I think, at this point, we understand basic modeling and BIM principles, right? Even if we don't necessarily use it on a daily basis. So let's talk about this Revit side, right? How do we take that preliminary model from FormIt into Revit, right? And what type of editing and modifications do we need to apply to make that usable for the end goal, that energy analysis?
Yeah, so in order to get the model from FormIt to Revit, it's very simple. You can save an RVT, which is the file format now I'm getting confused. It's the file format that Revit uses. You can save that right out of FormIt, and you can also save the native, I think it's a .axm file from FormIt. You can also import that into Revit using the add-ins. So when you open Revit, especially if I believe you have to be a subscription customer now, you can download the add-in for FormIt that will translate those models into Revit, and they come in very nicely as mass objects. The nice thing about FormIt is you can assign a family type to your mass objects before you export it, and so you can if you have families or anything like that within the FormIt program, they'll come right into Revit as well. So if you create casework, it's going to come into Revit as casework if you get that detailed in your FormIt model, which I don't typically do. But even the massing, you can take the massing and you can assign levels in FormIt, you can assign floors in FormIt, and they will come into Revit, and then you can use your mass tools to create actual Revit walls, floors, roofs, and so forth out of that mass object.
Okay.
So it's pretty simple, and seamless process.
Yeah, except for the part where you have to have that subscription, which is just so surprising. Who'd have thought that would be the case? All right, so I'm not going to mock anybody today. I'm not going to torture the developers here. All right, so that leaves us right with just the last bit. Yeah, there you go. Next, no comments. The last bit of the software leg, right, and that is Insight360. Now, as I understand it, and I'm limited in this, Insight360 is a cloud-based building analysis tool. It helps you check design criteria and your outputs for a variety of engineering disciplines, if I'm correct. And that's really, like I said, that's about all I know about it, right? So I'm going to kick it back to you. I'd say, can you explain what Insight360 is, or Insight360 is in a little more detail? What can it really do, and how do people actually use it for analysis on their projects?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually had the privilege of working with one of the developers on Insight360 when I was at one of the Inside the Factory events at the Autodesk office up in Boston. And so I've been working with Insight360 for quite a few years, and we established Dennis McNeil is the developer that I worked with. And we kind of established that Insight360 is a what-if program.
Okay.
It is used very early in analysis. So, still during schematic design or early design documents. And it's a program that allows you to take your basic building model. So it doesn't even need to be completely filled out. As long as you could use mass objects, or you could use walls, floors, roofs, or you can use a combination of both. And if you're in FormIt, it will take that model directly and it will send it up to the Insight360 website.
Okay.
And if you're in Revit, you have to create an energy analysis model, which is a 3D view within Revit. And then that gets sent to Insight360. And then in Insight360, it's this really cool, very easy, easy user interface to work with, and it gives you different options for energy settings. For example, the amount of glazing that you have on one wall. You can adjust the settings. You can choose different options. And I'm a very visual person, so not having this kind of visual in front of me to show you how it works.
That's the hard part of doing a podcast, I know.
Yeah. But they have what are called these little widgets, and they're just little boxes, and you click on the box, and it has a slider. It shows you how your building is modeled. There's a little triangle to indicate how your building is modeled. And then it has other options, and you can use the slider to set the different options to find the the best case scenario really for your building. So there are quite a few different options. Glazing, there are options for solar panels, there are options for building occupancy, occupancy sensors on lights and systems, the mechanical systems themselves. You can choose, a different mechanical system and so forth. The building orientation, if you're that early in schematic design, you can choose if you can rotate maybe the building, 15, 20 degrees. Is it going to make a difference in your energy use?
Yeah,
and that's
have
all
a
based
huge impact. Just being able to be, up here in the northern hemisphere, right? Being able to tilt towards the south to keep solar panels and glazing and thround walls, all faced towards the sun all day. That can have a massive impact on your energy output.
Sure. Oh. Yeah, absolutely. And it's all based off of ASHRAE 90.1 criteria, as well as the Architecture 2030 challenge. And so there's a little slider that gives those kind of benchmarks that you can reach, and it's color coded. So it goes from red to yellow to green, kind of like Pennsylvania just did with this whole COVID thing. Don't get me started.
There you
go. But the goal is to get your building to green.
Right.
And, that's the, kind of the lower cost. You can use, the cost per year, or you can use the kilowatt hours per year. But again, it's a best case scenario. So it's not going to update your model automatically. It's not going to make any physical changes to anything, but it allows you to make decisions early on, that can really impact the environmental, assessment of your building.
Nice. Okay. Perfect. That's a good answer. I like that. So, all right. So now at least I somewhat understand it. Okay, cool. So Rocco, you've been sitting there so quietly, just other than me torturing about your wife and taking out the trash. So Rocco, you do
well. It's recycling, Jim.
I'm sorry, it's recycling. See, and we're talking about green stuff, and I'm completely useless, as my wife will tell you. I'm always useless. So Rocco, is this a growing area? Do you think? I mean, do you take a lot of calls from people who are really interested in the green energy and the building analysis tools that we're discussing here today?
So we're all about truth and honesty here, right? And
we are.
And I honestly don't. I don't. And I don't. I'm guessing that a lot of it is just around that there's not a lot of education around this kind of workflow. And that's part of the reason why we're here talking about it, right? I mean, to talk about what can be done. I mean, if you follow the press, right, there's a lot of documentation out there about it, but I don't hear a lot of people talking about it. So it's great to get Kimberly's perspective here, because she's done it out in the real world and has been involved in development of the whole workflow.
Right. And that's an important point. And I think, when we come back in the second half here, we're going to talk a little bit about the specifics of it, and we're going to talk about, exactly, what is energy and lead analysis? What does that actually mean? How does it apply in a practical sense? And what, the related costs and timeframes and so on might be. So I think with that, this is a perfect place to take a break and hear from today's sponsor. We'll be back with Kim Fuhrman in just a few minutes on the Cattle Call Podcast. All right, everybody, today's Cattle Call was brought to you courtesy of Zentech Consultants. That's Rocco and I. Zentech Consultants works with design and manufacturing firms to help our clients purchase and implement the software that they need in these complex industries. We provide a single point of contact for clients to buy, develop, and learn the most vital software systems for your specific needs. Zentech strives to be your trusted technology partner from your initial needs all the way through long-term support and training for your entire staff. So Rocco, why don't you tell them how to reach out to Zentech?
All right, yeah, you can reach out to us through zentechconsultants.net. You can email us at sales@zentechconsultants.net, or you can even call us, 866-824-4459.
Excellent. We look forward to hearing from y'all. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Cattle Call Podcast. We are talking with Kimberly Fuhrman, right, the president of AUGI, and our go-to person here at Zentech for all things related to architectural and building design. Today's topic is energy analysis and lead using Revit and FormIt with Insight360. That is just a mouthful. I don't know why we chose that as a topic. We could have pared that down somehow, couldn't we?
Sure.
All right. So far we've covered all of the three software systems, right, and what they each do. But I want to get into the specifics of what do we mean by energy analysis and lead. All right, so, Kim, we talked about it a little bit before, but what exactly is LEED, right? Most of us have heard of companies with LEED certification or projects that require LEED compliance, right? But, what is it really, and why is it important in the design world?
Yeah. Well, before we get into LEED, just speaking generally about energy analysis, when we're talking about early energy analysis, we're not talking about, any in-depth, I want to make sure that our MEP engineers out there aren't getting all worked up, because we're not looking at specifics, at this point. It's very early, early energy analysis, meaning early in design. Just, like I said, with Insight, kind of a best case scenario is what we're looking for. And, we're really not stepping on the MEP toes,
Okay.
the mechanical engineering toes. We're just looking at some overall, especially the building structure and things like that, and how we can be kind of environmentally responsible with all that. So then, talking about LEED, leadership in energy and environmental design is a rating system put out by the U.S. Green Building Council, or USGBC. We have to have acronyms,
We need more of those. We don't have enough yet.
We need acronyms. And so the USGBC, along with, here's another one for you, GBCI, which is the people that actually do the accreditation and the certification for buildings, have created, this rating system, and there are several different ways that a building can be certified. There's LEED for new construction. There's core and shell. There's an interior design certifications. There's certification for schools. Basically any type of construction that you're doing, there's a LEED rating system that can be applied to it. There actually is a city about an hour away from me here in Pennsylvania that was one of the first in the country to be a LEED for cities. Gold, I believe they're gold certified city, and that's Lancaster, Pennsylvania. So if you
Really?
got, if you
That's
ever get over
interesting.
this way, go through Lancaster. It's a beautiful city, and they've done a lot with their infrastructure, with their buildings, and so forth to become a LEED certified city. So, a lot of different ways to apply LEED to what we do.
Interesting. Yeah, I wasn't aware of Lancaster. I'll have to check that out now. Now I'm interested.
Yeah, and
Okay.
you have to say it right. It's Lancaster.
Yeah, now, see, I'm from
Lancaster.
Jersey. I can't say that.
That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
all I'm allowed to
Lancaster.
say is, hey,
It
yo.
just kind of rolls off. Everybody says Lancaster. No, it's not Lancaster.
It's
It's
Lancaster.
Lancaster.
Lancaster. Okay. Yeah,
It's that
listen.
Pennsylvania
Every
Dutch coming out.
every state has all of their little weird names, man. When
Right.
half the towns here in Jersey, you pronounce them, it doesn't look at all like it's spelled. You're, okay, sure.
Yeah.
So, all right. So basically, then with LEED, right, what we're talking about then, it's a green building program, right? So it means, like you said, we're looking to minimize carbon footprints and maximize use of renewable resources. But you're saying, if I understand, what you're saying, at this point, right, we're not dealing with power consumption and thermal regulation, things like that. It's not that yet, right?
It can be. Now, when you're getting into LEED, then we are getting into the specifics. So we are looking at the building system. We're looking at the materials that you're putting into the building. Are they locally sourced? Did they come from within, say, a 500-mile radius of the building? How are you going back to the recycling? When you're on a construction site, there's a lot of waste that happens on the construction site. How are you managing that? And when you're doing a LEED building, you're actually tracking, how much waste goes off-site, how much is being recycled, how much recyclable material is coming into the building, things like that. So there's a whole lot of specifics and what is called a LEED checklist. And so, as you're designing your building, as you're working with your contractors and your team members, you're kind of going down through the checklist and seeing what will apply to your building. Okay. The rating system is actually 100. I believe it's a 100-point system still, and there are 4 different levels of certification. So it's certified, silver, gold, and then platinum. And platinum is the highest, rating that you can get for a LEED building.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great thing. I like that. So, personally, I'm a big proponent of making better use of our design tech to improve the actual world around us, right? I think that all design, regardless of what industry you're in, should really focus on being as green as possible, right?
Sure.
But there's always the concern about cost.
Sure.
What are the costs related to doing this type of design, right? Not just the physical costs of using green technology, but of the additional time and the additional effort, or at least the perception of those that are going to go into a LEED type of design. So, from a realistic standpoint, is there a real world cost of LEED style projects? Do design firms need to take additional cost into consideration when they're bidding on a LEED job, that wouldn't show up maybe on a more traditional design?
Right. When I first started doing LEED buildings, and this, again, was back 2011, so not that long ago. But I can remember, talking about this with team members and the architect that I worked for saying that I think maybe then it was like maybe a 30% difference in cost to buy the green materials and so forth. I really think the materials themselves nowadays, 10 years later or whatever it is. But
we're all so old.
Yeah, I think most materials now are, do meet the green standards. So I really don't think there's a whole lot of difference in the materials, as far as the pricing to get green materials versus, something that's not. Honestly, I don't think there are many materials. Maybe there are. I just don't specify them. But, there really aren't that many materials now that aren't, meeting environmental or even LEED specifications. So I think that factor has kind of been taken out of the equation. Now, as far as the certification itself for LEED, yeah, there is absolutely additional cost for that. to register and to, certify the project. And you typically have additional commissioning on the building systems. So you have to make sure that the building system is working, the MEP, like the HVAC, the air conditioning and things like that they're all working and meet the standards that LEED requires. So there's, some additional personnel that need to be brought in on the project for that. And of course you have to have a LEED, accredited professional on your team that helps give you an extra point towards your LEED accreditation as well, or your LEED certification, I should say.
Okay. All right. So as far as I can see it then, right, the end game here is, it's the ability to do an energy analysis, right, potentially in the LEED format. You're using FormIt, Revit, Insight360 model processes we talked about earlier.
Yep.
And I think that there are a lot of folks out there who hear that term, right, energy analysis, and I think it has to do with like electric and power considerations, and that's it, right? But it's actually a lot more than that. And I also think there's a misunderstanding that we're talking only about dealing with the building systems themselves, right? When the truth is, energy analysis can be applied to civil and exterior work, and like you were saying earlier, right, even include time of day and seasonal impact considerations, right? So and you touched base a little bit on this, but I just want to have you talk a little bit more about it. What type of energy analysis can we effectively approach with this trio of softwares, right? What are the various analysis concerns that we can address? And which ones do you think are the easiest and are going to have the most impact on people's design world?
Yeah. So again, just to differentiate, between energy analysis and the word I was looking for before and could not find was energy modeling.
Ooh, energy
okay,
modeling.
that's what the
Nice.
MEP guys do. Those, they get into the specifics of the load calculations of the systems and lights and so forth. With the early energy analysis, we can make, those early design decisions that will, kind of affect the building. Now, thinking about the purpose of the building, okay, so we need shelter. Some of us need places to work. Some of us, it is our shelter. We work here. But the point is that we have this responsibility, not just environmentally, and like you were saying, not just the building structure, but we also have the kind of this human element when we're talking about green buildings. And, it looks very different in many areas of the world, but we have this responsibility to design healthy buildings, for people to live in and work in and play in. And so we're looking at things like temperature, we're looking at daylighting, we're looking at airflow, and how are we getting fresh air into our buildings? I'm sure you guys remember kind of the sick building syndrome.
Oh yeah.
Many years ago, where the buildings were built, they were so tight that the materials that they were putting in, and the buildings were actually making people sick. And so this kind of rolled right out of that, in that we were trying to make our buildings healthier for people. So that's another kind of perspective that we have on this early analysis, and what decisions can we make early in this design process. It's cheaper to make these decisions earlier in the process than it is at construction.
Yeah.
And how can we make this the best building for the occupants when they take over?
Right. And I think I'd go a step further on what you said. It's not only is it easier to make these decisions early in the design rather than I think you have to make it in the design and spec it, because we all know, construction guys are going to take the cheapest course they can find, and they're going to cut, not to knock them, right? They run on thin margins and they got to get the money, but it's got to be spec'd, or they're going to find a cheaper, faster way to do it. That's just the way it is. All right, so let's bring Rocco back in here, because he's falling asleep while we talk about all this tech stuff. So, all right, Rocco. So in terms of energy analysis or general analysis, we're going to clarify that from the energy modeling, right? Which segment of our client base, right, is as much as we do get involved with this, you seem to be interested most in this topic, right? Are we talking about architect, structural, MEP, civil, right? Who does talk about it most?
I'd probably say the MEP sector.
Right, because like you were saying, they're very heavily focused on that engineering modeling, or excuse me, energy modeling.
Right.
Modeling. See, it is hard to say. You're
right.
Absolutely right. Yeah. So yeah, that's a big thing for them. That's who I have those conversations with, most often. But one thing that I do see is that we're seeing more and more of it again as we get more and more into the BIM with different products outside of Autodesk, like BricsCAD BIM and those modelers and so on. More and more people are getting very interested, like Kim was saying, in terms of the glazing opacity and the how much heat's coming into the building and how are we recycling air and so on. So I'm definitely seeing it a little bit more on the architectural side in my setup. So all right, so to kind of sum everything up here today, right? So you can use a combination of the software we've talked about here, to perform multiple analyses of your project, right? To optimize for a greener building, ensure compliance, right? And even potentially save the client money in the long term. And I know in the design side, it doesn't always save us money. It can be a little bit more expensive, even though, as you said, that price has really come down quite a lot. But long term, you're going to make your client happy. Okay, his cost of operating the building and the potential lawsuits from sick building syndrome, that all goes away, right? Which makes for a happy client, which makes for repeat customers. All right. So, and listen, so here's what I will say in terms of our topic today, right? So, everybody knows I am not generally a fan of using multiple software systems to accomplish a design. I like a one and done package. But sometimes, right, the benefits that you can see from using those multiple packages, like we're talking about here, can make that a worthwhile option. Okay. All right. So Kim, I'll throw one more question at you here. So, in terms of the integration of, FormIt and Revit and Insight, right? What can you tell us? How easy is it to move between each of those systems to perform these analyses, and what capabilities do they have for editing and updating those analyses across the life cycle of a design project?
Yeah.
So Jim, that was actually two questions, Jim. So
I don't know how to count, so just stop. Sure. Now you got something to say. Left me hanging at the beginning of the show, but now you want to join this conversation. You just go crawl back into your little cave, young man.
I'm sorry, Kimberly.
Who knows? Does it matter at this point?
Oh my goodness. It is very easy to work between those three programs. So like I said, the FormIt model, the Revit model, you send those up to the cloud, up to Insight360, and it will send you an email when the analysis is finished. So you can continue to work either in FormIt or Revit. And, when the analysis is done, you'll get an email. You can go right to the website from either Revit or FormIt, and you can take a look at, the Insight design, the Insight widgets. Now, if you wanted to make any changes, or if you find something in Insight that would improve your model, such as, making a glazing change or something like that, you would have to go back to Revit or FormIt to make that change physically within the model, and then send it back up to Insight for reanalysis. But it really is a very simple, very fast program. Like I said, you send it up to the cloud, and maybe just a few minutes later, you'll get an email saying that the analysis is done, and you can take a look at those results.
Nice. So, makes it easy, right? You can round trip it all to whatever your needs are. Excellent.
Right.
Okay. So all right, there you go. So there you have it, everybody. Someone smarter than Rocco or I has solidly explained exactly what we meant by today's topic, because I was confused. I feel like I actually learned something here for once, Rocco, instead of just hearing myself ramble, all right, which is a nice change of pace, actually. And I'm sure Rocco appreciated it too. Yeah, there you go. All right, so
maybe
with that,
I should do training for you guys.
Hey, what a great idea. Listen, if anybody needs training on Revit and FormIt and Insight360, call Zentech, and Kim will handle that for you. See? That's the beauty of that. Nice segue. Subtlety in its finest form.
Absolutely.
All right, folks. So with that, we're going to wrap it up here. And I want to thank Kim Fuhrman for being a wonderful guest, as always. And I hope she keeps coming back so she can teach this old dog some more new cool tricks.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for having me. It's always a pleasure.
We very much appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. We are going to get out of here, and we'll catch you next time on the Cattle Call Podcast.